You got paid this week. Maybe it was a good check. Maybe it was exactly what you expected. You saw the number hit your account, and for just a second, maybe half a second, something felt okay. And then you opened your phone. Rent, groceries, that subscription you forgot about. The thing you needed last month that you're still paying for, and slowly, without any dramatic moment, without any single catastrophic event, it was just gone, or mostly gone, or gone enough that the word fine stopped feeling accurate. But here's what's strange. If you turn on the news right now, they'll tell you the economy is doing well, unemployment is low, the stock market is up. Experts are using words like resilient and stable and growth. And you're sitting there doing the math in your head for the fourth time this week, wondering if you're somehow doing this wrong. You're not. And that confusion you're feeling, that gap between what they're saying and what you're actually living, that's not a personal failure. That's something else entirely, something that doesn't get talked about enough. We'll get there. But first, I want you to think about something. There's a version of being broke that's obvious. You can see it, you can name it. The account hits zero, the lights get shut off. There's a clear moment where things broke down and everyone around you can see it too. And then there's this other version. The version where you're technically fine. On paper, you're fine, you have a job, you have an apartment, you have Netflix. You're not in crisis, not really, not in any way you could explain to someone without feeling a little dramatic about it. But something feels off, something feels tight, like there's not enough air, like you're always one unexpected expense away from something you don't want to think about. That's not a character flaw. That's a structural experience that millions of people are having right now, simultaneously, in silence, because it doesn't look like the kind of broke that gets you sympathy or support or even acknowledgement. It just looks like regular life. In that silence, that's part of what makes it so exhausting. Here's the thing about recessions, the official kind, the kind economists declare and news anchors announce. They follow specific rules. GDP has to drop, unemployment has to spike. There are thresholds, metrics, a box that has to get checked. But what happens when people's lived experience doesn't match the metrics? What happens when the data says one thing and your checking account whispers something completely different? That's the silent recession, not a technical term, not something you'll find in a Federal Reserve report, but something closer to a psychological and financial pressure that doesn't register on the official instruments, because the official instruments aren't measuring what you're actually feeling. They're measuring output, production, employment numbers. They're measuring whether the machine is running. They are not measuring whether the people running the machine can afford dinner without doing math. And that distinction matters more than most people realize. There's a number that's been quietly reshaping the way millions of people experience their own financial lives. We'll come back to what that number is exactly, but I want to plant it here because when we get to it, it's going to reframe everything we've been talking about. For now, just hold this idea. The economy can grow and your life can shrink at the same time. Both of those things can be true simultaneously. And the reason that feels so disorienting, the reason it makes you question yourself, is that we've been culturally taught that they're the same thing, that a healthy economy means a healthy financial life for the people inside it. But that's not how it works, that's not how it's been working. Here's where it gets a little psychological. Your brain is not great at understanding systems, it's great at understanding blame. When something feels wrong, the brain wants to assign responsibility. And if the news is telling you the economy is fine and your life doesn't feel fine, your brain will quietly, almost automatically, land on you. Must be something I did. Must be something I'm not doing. Other people seem to be managing. And that internal narrative is doing something dangerous. It's privatizing a collective experience. It's making a shared structural problem feel like an individual personal failure. You're not bad with money. You're navigating a cost structure that has outpaced wage growth for years in housing, in groceries, in insurance, in childcare, while being told repeatedly that the economy is performing well. The cognitive dissonance alone is exhausting. And most people carry that exhaustion quietly because they don't have the language to explain what's happening. I feel broke sounds like a personal confession. It shouldn't, it should sound like an observation about a system. Now that number I mentioned. Economists call it the real wage. It's what your paycheck actually buys, adjusted for inflation, adjusted for the rising cost of the things you actually need. And here's what the data has been showing for a while now: real wages for a significant portion of workers have been stagnant or declining, even as nominal wages, the raw number on your check, have technically gone up. Which means you might be earning more dollars than you were 3 years ago and affording less. Your brain experiences this as failure, as falling behind, as doing something wrong. But what you're actually experiencing is the math, the very predictable, very real math of costs rising faster than income, compounded over months and years, until the gap between what life costs and what life pays starts to feel impossible to close. That's not a personal story, that's a structural one. And here's where it shifts. When people feel financially stressed but can't name why, when the economy says fine but the gut says something else, something interesting happens psychologically. Spending behavior changes in ways that feel irrational but are actually deeply human. People make short-term decisions that feel good in the moment but make the long-term harder, not because they're irresponsible, because the brain, under chronic low-grade financial stress, starts operating in a kind of scarcity mode. A mode that prioritizes relief right now over optimization later. There's research on this, the idea that scarcity, even the perception of scarcity, captures cognitive bandwidth. It narrows focus. It makes the immediate problem feel so loud that the future gets quiet. So the question isn't, why can't people just budget better? The question is, what does chronic financial pressure actually do to decision-making? And once you ask it that way, the answer stops sounding like laziness. It starts sounding like a response, a very human, very rational response to an irrational situation. If this is landing somewhere close to home, you'll probably want to stay with this channel. There's more of this. Here's what most people don't realize about the silent recession specifically. It doesn't require a crash to be real. It doesn't need a dramatic event, a headline, a market collapse. It just needs costs to quietly outpace income for long enough that the gap becomes part of daily life, baked in, normal feeling but not actually normal. And the cruelest part, because there's no official moment, no declared emergency, no cultural acknowledgement, people going through it don't get to grieve it, don't get to name it, don't get to say this is hard without feeling like they're being dramatic. So they just carry it. Quietly, persistently, while scrolling past headlines about economic resilience. I don't want to leave you in that weight entirely, because there's something useful that lives on the other side of numbing this accurately. When you understand that what you're experiencing is structural, not moral, not personal, not a reflection of your worth or your intelligence or your efforts, something shifts. Not everything. The math doesn't change immediately, the costs don't drop. But the story you tell yourself about why you're struggling does. And that story matters more than people think, because the story shapes the decisions, and the decisions over time shape the trajectory. The first move isn't a budgeting app or a side hustle or a savings challenge. The first move is refusing to absorb a systemic problem as a personal one. Once you see that, once you understand that the gap between how the economy looks and how it feels isn't confusion, it's information, you start asking different questions. Not what's wrong with me, but what's actually happening and what can I actually do inside that reality? That's a harder question, a more honest one. And yeah, it changes how you look at basically everything you thought you knew about money. We'll get into that.